On Olympus, beauty wasn't just a virtue, it was a requirement. And one god was born without it. He limped. He was flawed. So he was cast out, not by an enemy, by his own mother. Hera, queen of the gods, looked at her newborn son and decided he didn't measure up. But here's where the story gets strange. The one actually keeping Olympus running, it was the hands of that same discarded god. Hephaestus, the most looked down upon god on Olympus, and yet the only one who made Olympus what it was. The fact that both of those things are true at the same time tells you this isn't just a simple story. Picture Olympus, 12 gods, each blazing in their own glory. Zeus grips his lightning bolt and gazes down at the world. Ares tears across the battlefield, fear made flesh. Apollo splits the sky as he drives the sun. Aphrodite barely has to breathe before the world trembles. On the surface, it's perfect, brilliant, unstoppable. But follow that brilliance back to its source, and every single thread leads to the same place. Zeus commanded the world with his thunderbolt. Hephaestus forged it. Ares became the terror of every battlefield. Hephaestus made his weapons. Hermes cut across the sky on winged sandals. Hephaestus crafted those too. The golden chariot that carried the sun each day. The armor that made Achilles untouchable in battle. The thrones where the gods sat. The gates of Olympus itself. Everything that made the gods look like gods started on his workbench. He even shaped Pandora, the first woman, with his own hands. The very way humans came to exist in this world passed through his fingers. Olympus looked perfect because the god they had thrown away was behind the scenes, building all of it. That's the first edge of this myth. The gods shining from the most glorious thrones were standing on the labor of the one nobody could see, and no one said a word about it. There was no reason to. Hephaestus was the lowly god. They could acknowledge his craft and still refuse to acknowledge him. That was the way Olympus dealt with him. And that dynamic didn't stay in the myth. Hera's logic never went away. Today there's no thunderbolt, just a resume. No Olympus, just an interview room. We still read appearance before ability. We judge the surface before the depth. Studies on how looks affect salaries. The idea that managing your image is a competitive edge, even in jobs that never put you in front of a camera. The person who works the hardest in any room being the quietest one, pushed to the edge of it. We replay that same logic, the one Hera used to throw her own son out in small ways every single day. If that's uncomfortable to sit with, that discomfort is the proof. But if this myth were only a critique of how we judge by appearance, it wouldn't have survived thousands of years. The real power comes after that. Hephaestus spent 9 years in the place he was thrown to, a cave beneath the sea, no light from Olympus, no sound of the gods feasting above. And for all that time, he did one thing. He fed the fire, shaped the metal, and pulled things into existence that had never existed before. Not to earn approval, not to show anyone. He just made, because that was how he was. Think about what it actually means to spend 9 years in a place where no one sees you. To keep lighting the fire every day in a space where no one is watching, and no one is coming. That's not stubbornness. It's not revenge. It's something deeper than both. It's being so completely yourself that you don't need an audience to keep going. For Hephaestus, making things wasn't survival. It was identity. Then he sent Olympus a gift, a golden throne, set with jewels, precise in every detail, breathtaking from any angle, the most beautiful object ever made, sent to the world where beauty decided everything. Hera sat down the moment she saw it. Of course she did. She believed she was exactly the kind of person who deserved something like that. The moment she did, invisible chains closed around her, chains so fine that no divine eye could see them. The queen of the gods hung suspended, unable to move. Olympus stopped. Ares charged in to free her. Hephaestus threw fire at him. Ares fell back. Athena, goddess of wisdom, tried to negotiate. Nothing worked. Even Zeus couldn't break the chains. Every kind of power Olympus had came to a dead stop in front of one chair. The god of war couldn't do it. The goddess of wisdom couldn't do it. The wielder of lightning couldn't do it. Only the one who built it could undo it. This scene hits so hard because what collapses here isn't just a power ranking. It's everything Olympus ever used as a measuring stick. Beauty, strength, wisdom, authority, all of it helpless at once. And none of those things were what solved it. Only the ability to make, the hands that could bring something from nothing. Hephaestus never tried to become stronger. Olympus spoke the language of beauty and force. Instead of fighting in that language, he built a different one. Design, craft, the ability to make something no one else could take apart. He didn't fight the world that rejected him on its own terms. He didn't get stronger. He got more precise. Eventually, Dionysus was the one who brought Hephaestus back to Olympus, and the way he did it is worth noting. He didn't threaten. He didn't fight. He just sat beside him, poured some wine, and listened. What all the force in the world couldn't do, one person simply being present accomplished. Hephaestus came back with conditions: a proper place, his own forge, and a wife. Zeus gave him Aphrodite, the most scarred god on Olympus, married to the most beautiful. The other gods must have seen it as a mismatch from the start. Aphrodite certainly did. She never wanted the marriage. Before long, she was with Ares. The irony of that is sharp. Ares had come to free Hera by force and retreated under a shower of fire. The god who couldn't overpower Hephaestus was now sleeping in his home. Aphrodite chose someone beautiful and strong, but she had already seen exactly how powerless that beautiful, strong god was when Hephaestus decided to make a point. Even the goddess of love wasn't free from the logic of the world she lived in. When Hephaestus found out, he said nothing. He went down to his forge and lit the fire. He began weaving a net from bronze, threads so thin that no divine eye could detect them, strong enough that no god could tear through them, so precisely made that even looking directly at the bed, you wouldn't know it was there. He draped it over the bed. Then he casually mentioned he was leaving for a trip. The moment the two of them lay down, the net closed. Hephaestus called every god on Olympus to come and see. Aphrodite and Ares, caught in the net, exposed in front of everyone. The god of war, pinned and motionless inside. A craftsman's trap, witnessed by all of Olympus. Homer recorded that the gods laughed. It's clear who that laughter was aimed at. Ares, not Hephaestus. The revenge wasn't built from power. It was built from precision. Look at how that revenge was actually structured. He didn't hurt them. He didn't destroy them. He just made them visible. He took what had been hidden and made it impossible to hide. If Hera had erased his existence by throwing him off Olympus, Hephaestus answered by putting Ares and Aphrodite completely on display. In front of every god, he returned erasure with exposure, in a way that no one could argue with. But here's where you have to stop and look at the whole myth again. Hephaestus never received full recognition, even after the net. Even after stopping Olympus cold and outsmarting every god who came against him, he was never treated as an equal. His craft was respected. He himself was not. He stayed at the edges of Olympus his whole life. He was called late to feasts. He appeared near the end in the stories. When people list the 12 Olympians, his name usually comes last. The idea that proving yourself changes everything is only half right. Hephaestus brought all of Olympus to a standstill with his ability, and the next day he was still the limping god. The bias tied to his appearance was never fully erased by anything he made. The world doesn't change as fast or as fairly as we'd like it to. This myth doesn't soften that. It doesn't wrap it in comfort. It just records it as it was. That's why this isn't an old piece of reassurance. It's an old piece of truth. If you visit Athens today, the temple of Hephaestus is still standing. The Hephaestion on the hill of Agoraios Kolonos above the ancient Agora. Built in the 5th century BC, it's one of the most completely preserved ancient Greek temples anywhere in the world. The Temple of Zeus has a few columns left. The Temple of Ares is barely a trace. The temple of the most overlooked god on Olympus outlasted almost all of them. Just like the things he made, Hephaestus wasn't a tragic underdog. He was an underestimated architect. What the world thought of him and what he actually was never matched from beginning to end. Olympus didn't love him, but it couldn't function without him. They looked down on him while standing entirely on what his hands had built. They treated his existence as less, while nothing they called great could be completed without him. Olympus never resolved that contradiction. It just let it remain. And that's exactly how this myth speaks to us today. Who are we treating the way Olympus treated Hephaestus? Is there someone around us being pushed to the edges because they don't fit the surface criteria, while quietly being the reason anything works at all? And are we like Olympus, just leaving that contradiction in place without ever really looking at it? That's why this myth refuses to disappear. Hephaestus wasn't the most beautiful god. He wasn't the strongest. He didn't sit at the head of any table. And yet, every form of authority on Olympus was only complete after passing through his hands. Zeus's power, Ares' terror, the gleaming thrones of the gods, None of it existed the way it did without him. Olympus decided who had worth based on appearance, but the thing that actually held Olympus up was the god they had disqualified. They created the standards. Hephaestus created the world. The one who was thrown away was Hephaestus. But the thing that was wrong was never his body. It was Olympus's measure of worth. And this myth, after thousands of years, has never taken that back.